While the SCO Summit, of course, is our top focus today, I want to start with the new rant against India for its purchase of Russian oil by none other than the trade advisor to the White House, Peter Navarro, who has hit a self-goal, and I'll tell you in a while from now how. Listen in.
Understand why he's getting to bed with Putin and Xi Jinping when he's the biggest democracy in the world. So I would just simply say to the Indian people, please understand what's going on here. You got Brahmins profiteering at the expense of the Indian people. We need that to stop.
Navarro has called India a laundromat for Kremlin. He's called India the Maharaja of tariffs. He's even claimed that this is Modi's war. And now Navarro says Brahmins profiteer at the expense of Indians. Let's be clear. For decades, America has been insulated, too self-focused, too wrapped up in its own interest to see the world as it really is. That ignorance now reeks of arrogance. Your attacks aren't analysis, they're distractions from the SCO Summit and from the image of India sitting across the table with Vladimir Putin and other leaders from the global south. Because here's the truth, Mr. Navarro, India engages with Russia, with the West, with the global south, and that's what you call diplomacy, that's what you call leverage, that's called balance. Now, while India builds bridges, you throw insults. While India talks solutions, Washington stumbles into tariff wars. Your own media has, by the way, called it strategic blunder. So say what you want, Mr. Navarro. In the end, your words don't weaken India. They only expose America's insecurity. And if I may, it makes Americans just Google the word Brahmins. All right, we're moving on to the SCO Summit, our top focus today, the meeting between the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Russian President Vladimir Putin has concluded. We have Aditya Rajkor live with us. We also have Gauri joining us live from Tianjin. And we also have our guest with us, who we will go to in a moment from now. But let's start with Aditya. Aditya, the big takeaways from that bilateral meet. It was a meeting not only India and Russia would be watching closely, but the White House as well.
Well, of course, White House is tracking each and every moment of Prime Minister Narendra Modi here, and that is clearly visible from the kind of statements that have coming in from US, from Peter Navarro, for instance, attacking Brahmins of India. Clearly, that clearly indicates that he does not have any advice for Trump. This is the level of frustration that they have, the kind of arrogance that they have, that they are kind of provoking Indians against Americans. We are not going to fall into that trap. But clearly, SCO is a success. Prime Minister Narendra Modi sharing stage with Xi Jinping and Putin, clearly sending out a strong message from the SCO platform to White House, that White House may think what they do about India, about Russia, and about China. But here is a platform of resilience. Here is a bilateral ties between India and China and India and Russia, which are independent of any other, and will continue to boom in the coming days as well. So the bilateral meeting between Putin and Modi is over. In a few minutes from now, we will get more details on that. There will be a statement issued both by India as well as Russia. We will also have Vikram Misri, the Foreign Secretary, release a video and give details of what really transpired in that meeting. These visuals of Putin and Modi walking together, coming out. Modi will be heading out to the airport to leave for New Delhi after concluding a very fruitful and successful visit both to Japan and China. You can see that handshake between Putin and Prime Minister Narendra Modi taking place here. Very significant visuals coming in of the kind of bonhomie that is shared by both these leaders of India and Russia, clearly charting out a very progressive path both for New Delhi and Moscow. So clearly a lot of headlines still awaited from Vikram Misri, the Indian Foreign Secretary, and the statement that will come out. But I'm sure that White House will be keeping a very close watch on what was discussed on the Ukraine crisis. Were there any commitments made? And apart from that, on the trade front, how will India and Russia take forward the trade, the Russian oil? Because who knows, Trump may decide to put further sanctions on India if India and Russia continue to boom their trade.
Right, Aditya, do stay with me. Gauri Dwivedi also joining me live, and Maximilian Hess, author and fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute, London. Maximilian, thank you for joining us your early morning and our afternoon. From where you're sitting, how do you see the events that have unfolded, especially with Russia at the SCO meeting, with those very symbolic photo ops that have taken place with India and China? How does Europe look at this?
Well, thank you for having me. I think that what we see on display yesterday and this morning really shows the ineffectiveness of President Donald Trump's strategy. It is certainly reasonable that the United States and that international coalition partners look to pressure Russia over its unilateral aggression in Ukraine. Sanctions have been introduced on a multilateral basis for the last 3.5 years, but this random lashing out at India over its purchases of Russian oil is an ineffective policy and one that risks being counterproductive because it is pushing India closer to China and Russia. If the West and the United States want to constrain Russian oil exports, they have to work together, put these sanctions on a multilateral basis, target not just India, but other purchasers of Russian oil as well, which include China, but even more traditional Western allies or countries like India in the middle, such as the United Arab Emirates and Turkey that have engaged in this trade. And the fact that the Trump administration is engaging in, frankly, race-baiting language targeting India directively is highly ineffective.
Right, do stay with me. A quick summation, really. We're just going to sum up what has been happening at that bilateral meeting and what this means for India and Russia. You can see the warmth despite the hostile targeting by Donald Trump. That's what Maximilian was talking about. Despite those tariffs, a key message, a strong message going out from both those leaders. Bonhomme disregarding Trump's harsh scrutiny at this point, not only Trump's, but his teams as well. We spoke about Navarro right at the top of the show. India-Russia relationship is bulletproof. It goes back decades, and what this proves over and over again, the two leaders meeting, their messages to each other, their calls to each other, is that this relationship is there to stay between the two countries. And of course, the India-Russia defense relationship remains invulnerable despite all that the West has been saying over the last couple of years, trying to even put pressure on India initially when the Ukraine-Russia war broke out to take sides. But of course, India remains multi-aligned. That's something that they have made very clear. Gauri now joining us live from Tianjin. Gauri, some unexpected moments that we've seen through the morning in Tianjin. Of course, that condemnation in terms of the terror attack in Pahalgam. Also, some key moments of Putin and Modi in that car. Take us through all those unexpected moments from this morning.
Some very significant developments, Vedika, took place here in Tianjin, and that really sets the stage for the kind of messaging that is being sent out from the SCO Summit. Now, several issues that you raised, let's take them one by one. First and foremost, the SCO Summit declaration does clearly mention Pahalgam terror attack. In no uncertain terms that was mentioned. The Prime Minister's SCO comments also focused on counter-terrorism. It focused on terror. It focused on Pahalgam, spoke about Al-Qaeda, and also mentioned how India has been, attacked due to these terror attacks on several occasions and the kind of damage it does on a long-term basis. And the fact that the SCO Summit has come out saying that that should be addressed, whether it is the perpetrators and the supporters, or that framing, that phrase is extremely significant, because that's essentially what India has all along been saying, that perpetrators, funders, supporters all need to be brought to justice. That's the phrasing. So that's a huge diplomatic win as far as India is concerned. And that sets the stage for how it sees terror going forward. Those talks with regard to terrorism will be significant. Now, the second important bit that, the bilateral that has just ended, we're putting out those visuals for our viewers who are tuning in right now. The Prime Minister Modi and Vladimir Putin bilateral has ended. The PM is now headed to the airport, Tianjin Airport, from where he will plane for New Delhi. Several key aspects that came out of this meeting, and even as we await the formal statements and readouts that are likely, one must see the body language here, the way the both leaders addressed each other, my dear friend. And, all those body language and gestures and phrases add up in terms of what it means for the India-Russia relationship. Donald Trump may have started out this year in this presidency, this term, by saying that he wants to bring an end to the war. He he wants to isolate Russia. None of that is happening. What is happening is India talking about possibility of ending the Russia-Ukraine war. The Prime Minister mentioned that at the SCO, at the bilateral level, indicating that India may become a player in terms of what could be that peace roadmap and how will that be identified. And I think that's a very significant headline. And as we await for more details that will come out in terms of the India-Russia relationship post the bilateral.
Maximilian, two questions for you. I know you have to leave, so I'll make them quick. One, what are the key takeaways for you from this summit, keeping the tariffs in mind from Donald Trump? Because, of course, like I've been saying from the beginning of the show, it's not that the tariffs came after the SCO summit was, in place, and we're seeing the visuals from there. All right, I'm going to come back to you in a moment from now, Maximilian. That's the Indian Prime Minister leaving for India after that SCO summit in Tianjin. His first stop was Japan. The second stop, of course, was Tianjin in China. All smiles, waving at the people and leaving for New Delhi from the airport. He's got with him a huge diplomatic win for India, which is the condemnation by the SCO members. Gauri still with us. Gauri, the big breakthrough really for us, which we weren't expecting, is a consensus from the members of the SCO on terrorism and what they had to say about the terror attack in April in India.
Indeed, that's the big win for India, for Indian diplomacy here at the SCO. Prime Minister Modi now in planes for India. Those are live visuals that we are putting out for our viewers tuning in. That also means Prime Minister Modi wraps up his two-nation tour. There was also a very successful Japan tour ahead of China, where there was a lot of focus in terms of both trade and building in terms of the investments from Japan, and with regard to several aligned geopolitical objectives. That was phase one, leg one of the Prime Minister's tour. And now as he emplanes from SCO here in Tianjin, India also has a very important and a very significant message from the SCO, where the declaration strongly condemns as far as Pahalgam is concerned, and also puts the roadmap as to how should terrorism be handled. And I think that's equally significant as the big takeaway as far as the SCO summit is concerned. Also the messaging, let's also tell that to our viewers, Vedika, today was also about those big optics of the three leaders coming together. There may be unofficial exchange of greetings and an exchange of words, but the messaging that came out with the president, the two presidents, along with Prime Minister Modi there, and I think that's another key takeaway of the SCO summit.
Gauri, I'm going to come back to you in a moment from now. Maximilian still with us from London. Maximilian, how do you view this meeting or this huddle among the three leaders from the world's three largest countries, Russia, India and China? Symbolic as it may be, it also sends out a strong message to the White House, to the West, about the bullying that Donald Trump has been attempting with India, with other countries at this point. If not the SCO in particular, this is one image that perhaps the White House will sit up and be watching closely.
Yes, certainly. I think as we were discussed earlier, the pageantry of this image shows the counter-effectiveness of Washington's strategy by trying to act unilaterally. It pushes middle countries more into Russia and China's camps. Now, I would see those as two very different camps, but the White House often sees them as one, and having India move closer to that and away from the Quad is clearly against Western interests. That being said, there are natural limits to this partnership, and the SCO remains a sort of talking shop to complain about the West and the United States rather than to actively, effectively agree new policies. And on that, I think Prime Minister Modi is making a clear decision here to react to Trump, but has to remember and will remember that Vladimir Putin himself is not a trustworthy partner. Vladimir Putin, of course, was joined by Imran Khan at the beginning of his full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Russia will look to Pakistan if it sees temporary gains to be made there as well. And, of course, what happens in Ukraine and Russia's aggression and stealing that territory, of course, has implications for other boundary disputes and territorial disputes by other countries. So, this is a reaction rather than the building of something new. What remains to be seen is whether Russia, India, and China can find ways to work on that relationship that isn't just complaining about the United States' admittedly short-sighted actions.
Maxwell, even a word on India and China. While you've had the Chinese president come out and talk about how India and China should be friends and not foes, the rivalry should not be a part of the conversations going ahead, there is a huge amount of mistrust between the two nations, especially because of the line of actual control. So even whatever happened at the SCO Summit, you've seen those visuals, you've seen those images, India will have to tread with caution in terms of future ties with Beijing.
Certainly, India has to tread with caution over those issues in the line of actual control and the boundary disputes that India and China have. China's increased military activity on that high Tibetan plateau frontier as well. But what I think India has to keep in mind and the wider world has to keep in mind is China is, at least historically, in the last not just 20 years of Vladimir Putin's terms, but the last 50 years, much less likely to invade its neighbors than Russia is. India and China have a competition over a lot of areas of economic interest, a lot of areas of regional influence, but this is the kind of competition that can be done on a peaceful manner, and I think that President Xi of China is at least trying to extend an olive branch there. Again, that doesn't mean he's motivated by any desire to actually solve these issues, but rather to find ways to push back against the United States as well.
Maxwell and Gauri also with us. Gauri, a quick word on the condemnation also that's come through from this SCO Summit in terms of all the member states condemning the Pahalgam tragedy and the terror attack that happened there. The irony, of course, is that you had one man in that room as well, the Pakistan Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif.
Not just him, Vedika, there was also the Turkish President Erdogan. Let's not forget the role that Turkey played during Operation Sindoor, the Turkish drones that were supplied to Pakistan. Also the host country. We all know, in fact, that the Deputy Army Chief of India was when he said that Pakistan was the laboratory of Chinese weapons. About 3/4 of Pakistani weapons right now are of Chinese origin. There was complete alignment as far as the intel sharing between the two sides is concerned. And add to it Azerbaijan. So you put all of them together. This is the watching at the SCO Summit. This was a message to the world and, of course, to the perpetrators, funders, supporters of cross-border terror attacks. Let's also not forget, Vedika, this is happening when India has redefined how it now views any act of terror. It is now an act of war, which means that if there will be any terror attack on Indian soil, it will be treated as an act of war, and India will respond appropriately. That has been the new normal, and that's exactly what India's messaging was to the world. Now, that really sets the context of how it sees terrorism as one of the central pieces of any significant bilateral relationship. And that also includes China, which is why there have only been tentative steps forward with regards to the bilateral relationship between India and China, where the contentious issues still remain. Now put that in context with what the SCO statement is, and you put that together and you realize that as far as the India-China relationship is concerned, the bilateral had all the correct optics, even though the cautious nature continues on both sides because of the trust deficit that remains. However, none of that is there with regard to Russia. The Russia-India relationship is now thriving, robust, and which is why the body language is also completely different. You have the two leaders being at ease with each other, speaking, joking, patting each other's shoulder, and of course that ride. That ride may be short, but it did give the leaders a chance to speak to each other directly without the delegations on both sides. And that tells you that from here on, whatever may be the official readout that comes out, there is a clear intent on both India and Russian side to continue the momentum that they have received in terms of their relationship. Trade, defense, even education, Vedika. I think there could be a lot of focus on Russia opening up its universities for Indian students. Indian students are the largest chunk in American universities, but look at the way Donald Trump is treating them. You do not get visas. That's such a big headache right now for parents and for anxious students. Russia could open that avenue for us. And that itself would be a huge, important aspect in terms of people-to-people ties. Add to it the possibility of India goading both sides, Russia and Ukraine, to find a peace roadmap.
Gauri, do stay with me. We also have Maximilian with us. We'll go back to him also in a moment from now. But we didn't expect, and that's something Gauri, Aditya and I have been discussing, that huge condemnation that's come through from the SCO Summit on the Pahalgam terror attack. And that started, or rather they came to that after the Indian Prime Minister made this statement on terror at the SCO Summit.
बड़ी चुनौतियां आतंकवाद सिर्फ किसी देश की सुरक्षा ही नहीं बल्कि पूरी मानवता के लिए एक साझा चुनौती है। कोई देश, कोई समाज, कोई नागरिक अपने आप को इससे सुरक्षित नहीं समझ सकता। इसलिए आतंकवाद से लड़ाई में भारत ने एकजुटता पर बल दिया। इसमें एससीओ रेड्स की बहुत महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका रही। इस वर्ष भारत ने जॉइंट इंफॉर्मेशन ऑपरेशन को लीड करते हुए अल कायदा और इससे जुड़े आतंकी संगठनों से लड़ने का इनिशिएटिव किया। हमने रेडिकलाइजेशन के विरुद्ध समन्वय बढ़ाने और मिलकर कदम उठाने का भी प्रस्ताव रखा। टेरर फाइनेंसिंग के खिलाफ आवाज उठाई। इसमें मेरे समर्थन के लिए मैं आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। एक्सेलेंसी, भारत पिछले 4 दशकों से निर्मम आतंकवाद का दंश झेल रहा है। कितनी ही माताओं ने अपने बच्चे खोए और कितने बच्चे अनाथ हो गए। हाल ही में हमने पहलगाम में टेररिज्म का बहुत ही घिनौना रूप देखा। यह हमला केवल भारत की अंतरात्मा पर ही आघात नहीं था, यह मानवता में विश्वास रखने वाले हर देश, हर व्यक्ति को खुली चुनौती थी। ऐसे में प्रश्न उठना स्वाभाविक है, क्या कुछ देशों द्वारा आतंकवाद का खुलेआम समर्थन हमें स्वीकार्य हो सकता है? एक्सेलेंसी, हमें स्पष्ट रूप से और एक स्वर में कहना होगा कि आतंकवाद पर कोई भी डबल स्टैंडर्ड स्वीकार्य नहीं होंगे। हमें मिलकर आतंकवाद का हर रंग में, हर रूप में विरोध करना होगा। ये मानवता के प्रति हमारा दायित्व है।
Maximilian Hess still with us, and so is Gauri. Maximilian, before I let you go, my last question to you is, you know, with the tariffs that have been implemented on India, imposed rather on India, US is being seen as an unpredictable partner for India. But even in terms of realignments, in terms of reaching out to other allies and building from there, the reality is it's going to take time for India to do that. So while you see the optics play out, the bottom line is it's not an immediate, you know, turn to the east in this case or to the global south that India can manage in the near future.
Well, certainly. India's largest export partner remains the United States. The U.S. is a very deep and important global consumer market, and Donald Trump is imposing these costs not just on the U.S.'s trade partners, but on the U.S. consumer, who is ultimately the one who pays the tariff, and that poses potential economic weakness for the United States. But at the same time, there are huge capital controls in almost all of the countries that make up the so-called BRICS or even the SCO. It is very unlikely that they're able to reach anytime soon truly global alternative economic structures that can replace the U.S.'s role there. But does this further the narrative of U.S. decline and the rise of some other kind of potential and increased multipolarity at least? Yes, it certainly does.